in the Woods is an indie game from 2017 that is about being in the woods at night, where the woods are actually a town called Possum Springs, a once thriving mining town in the American Rust Belt ravaged by late-stage capitalism, where there are little to no economic opportunities and most people are hoping to leave, and where the night is actually a lot of times during the day, including the afternoon, evening, and also, yes, night. But don't be fooled by the adorable art and my jokey tone here. This game delves into some pretty dark territory, which I'm also going to be talking about. So, trigger warning for the topics that you see on the screen right now. And yes, this means I will be talking about the extremely controversial and possibly inherently triggering co-creator of Night in the Woods, Alec holowka, later. First, I'll be talking about something much less controversial, which is that I hate May. Yeah? Yeah, I actually can't see shit without my glasses, so that's all you get. There we go. Can actually see. Night in the Woods is an amazing game that you should play. It has incredible writing, beautiful art, smooth and bouncy animation that just makes you want to jump around all the time, and a super immersive soundtrack that just really ties everything together. Warning, everything beyond this point is going to go into spoiler territory, so I'll give you a few hours to go play the game right now. You play as a 20-year-old college dropout cat person named May, who comes back to her hometown hoping to return to the simpler time of her youth, only to find that all her friends are now boring adults with full-time jobs, and her parents are in debt and might lose their house, and there's some spooky shit happening. Scratch that. Genuinely terrifying shit happening, like kids being kidnapped and godlike figures showing up in May's dreams, and then in real life maybe, and walking through the town and talking to various people. There's this suffocating air of depression and hopelessness and entropy just permeating through every aspect of the place. And as you slowly uncover the mystery behind the terrifying spooky shit, it eventually leads you to finding a cult of local uncles who have been literally using human sacrifices to the local chthonic black goat god, who they believe will bring the town back to its former glory with jobs and economic growth and prosperity for everyone. Well, except for the people who died. At the very end of the game, we also uncover the mystery around why May dropped out of college in the first place, something she had been purposefully avoiding talking about, which is that she had some sort of dissociative disorder combined with severe anxiety and a good dose of anger issues on the side. It's never really given a name, and I won't try and give a diagnosis because I am not a doctor. I wouldn't be here doing this if I was. Just in case that wasn't clear, nya. Nya nya. 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 But basically what we know from how she describes it is that everything around her, everything she looks at, is nothing more than just shapes. Like pixels on a screen that make up the characters in a game. This applies to everything and everyone around her. Nothing, not even people, feel any more or less real than just a combination of shapes. The exception being that when she's in Possum Springs, the place she grew up in, the shapes feel a little less abstract. They feel more imbued with meaning outside of their superficial pixelation, because of her familiarity with everything and everyone there. But in college, a different city where everything and everyone she encountered was new and meaningless, it was all just pixels. So, after being unable to get herself to even go to class for 2 years, she came back home, hoping that everything would be the way she left it, and that thus it would all be okay and she would feel better. Spoiler alert! It was not, and May is not okay. One of the first things you get to do as May is go to band practice with your best friend Greg, a gay anarchist weirdo fox who may or may not be bipolar. It's fun, but slightly stressful since the game doesn't give you any instructions, something that really sets the tone for the entirety of the gaming experience, which I love. There you find his partner Angus, a soft-hearted, extremely responsible teddy bear with more than enough childhood trauma to go around, and B, a very cool, very intimidating goth crocodile who used to be May's best friend at some point, but now can't seem to stand her for reasons that don't become clear until later in the game. When I first played this part, I was a bit about the introduction of the relationship between Bee and May. I was worried because it felt kind of like typical, you know, oh, there can only be one girl in a band, and now that May's back, Bee can't be the girl in the band anymore, and so they have to fight because who will it be? Girl in the band. Only one girl in a band. How could we have two girls in a band? That doesn't happen. What? Two girls? What? Like as they're driving home, Bee kicks May out of her car almost out of nowhere, leaving her to just walk home in the dark. And so you're just like, what the— Why, Bee? Why? Why did you— what? Do you really not want another girl in the band that badly? You don't have to leave her out on the streets. But then as the story progresses, you slowly realize that Bee has more than enough reason to be acting this way towards May. See, Bee is no stranger to trauma herself, as we slowly learn that her entire life has come crashing down because of the sudden death of her mom. This event completely changed the course of Bee's life, making it impossible for her to go to college, leading her dad to become an alcoholic, having to leave the house she grew up in, which was right next to May's, and move to a shitty apartment, and leaving Bee to take care of the family hardware store and her dad all by herself. Heavy shit. So, as Bee's driving May home, May casually asks, "Are they training you to take over the store?" As in your mom and dad. Even though May was allegedly Bee's best friend in high school, she doesn't seem to remember the very important fact that Bee's mom is dead. It's obviously a highly triggering topic for Bee, so when May seems to be oblivious of the facts of the situation that she should know about, that seems to me to be more than enough reason for Bee to want to kick her out of her car. Being forced to play as May, this protagonist who we have no real control over, is one of the most emotionally frustrating experiences that a game will ever make you go through. Which is something I obviously highly encourage everyone to go and experience for themselves. After essentially forcing herself into getting invited for dinner, May gets to spend an intimate moment with Bee in her room. And no, it is not lesbian shit. We all thought it. We all wanted it to happen. Didn't happen. I'm sorry. See, Bee's been working since dawn, doing everything at the shop that her dad is supposed to. She got groceries, made dinner, and is for the first time all day able to just lay down in her still unpacked room and not have to actively think about or work on anything. In a moment of rare vulnerability, Bee opens up to May about having to be emotionally and financially responsible for her dad and the shop ever since her mom passed away. And what does May do? She starts a line of judgmental and straight-up ignorant questioning of Bee's life decisions, moving on to full-on berating her for not taking charge of her life, quitting her job, telling her dad off, and living life the way she wants to, the same way May is doing. Bee obviously does not respond well to this, and eventually kicks her out. Again. What's most frustrating here is that even though we as a player know that what May is doing is shitty, there just is no good option. Anything that May says will come out in the worst way possible. The first time I played this, I wanted to stop. Turn back, leave, run out of the room, anything, because who the fuck talks to someone like that? But you're not given a real choice here. The choice you are given is to choose the precise least shitty way you would like these shitty lines to be delivered by May. I'm so sorry, Bee. There's a few reasons that aren't just, May being a shitty person that contribute to why May seems so wholly incapable of seeing things from Bee's point of view. So let's try to break that down. The first thing is her own privilege, which she is unaware of. May lives a very different life from that of her peers. She doesn't have to work. Her parents are so understanding and completely okay with whatever she decides to do. She doesn't realize that she has the freedom to not have to worry and think constantly about these things that her peers have to, like making rent, getting food on the table for your dad who's depressed and probably wants to kill himself, getting out of toxic family relations in this shitty town where you don't want to be, and she doesn't have to worry about any of that. So there's that privilege on one side. And on the other, we have May's brain. To May, because everything in the world is made up of these shapes, that also means that they can be rearranged and stacked up and broken down and moved around in various ways that you want them to. Hopefully when I'm editing this, I can make it seem like I'm moving things around in a cool way. I don't know how to do that right now. But maybe future me will figure it out. I believe in you, future me. You're gonna do great. You're gonna do great, nya. 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 And it's not just objects. Like, to May, even B's dad can be rearranged and made to fit more into this role of what a dad should be. Someone who goes to work and takes care of the house and the mortgage and isn't a depressed alcoholic. And B herself also simply needs to rearrange herself so that she isn't doing so much work and she can actually do the things that she wants to do. May's like, if I was B, I would simply go to college. The physical, mental, emotional, and financial reality of the situation is just too abstract in May's head to comprehend. May probably genuinely doesn't understand why B isn't doing this simple thing that May would totally be doing in her position. Because she would be doing that, right?
At the end of everything, hold on to anything. This is the tagline that Night in the Woods was released with. While this sentence can be applied to almost any character in the game on some level, even the town itself, I think the person it applies to the most is B. B has lost everything. Her mom passed away, her dad isn't her dad anymore, her house isn't her home, her friends have all moved away and gone on with their lives without her, and she lost the future that she imagined herself having. She was valedictorian of her class and would have easily gotten into any college of her choice. She's competent, insightful, and empathetic, and has no time for murder cult dads blaming immigrants for stealing their jobs bullshit. She is stuck in a dying town with a dying business and a just waiting to die dad. She has nothing except for a dream of how things could have been. She gets to live a superficial but nonetheless meaningful version of that dream for like 2 hours every month, when she gets to go to a college party and flirt with dumb rich college boys and pretend like she's just a dumb college girl herself. At the end of everything for B, this fantasy that she gets to live for 2 hours every month is what she's been holding on to. And it's what in B's mind May tossed away for no reason. May, on the other hand, hasn't really lost much. Her mom and dad are the same as when she left. Her friends are mainly all there, except for Casey, who got murdered by the daddy cult. Rip Casey. She has much more agency over her own life than almost anyone else in the game, being able to fuck around all day without having to worry about her future or financial matters because her parents will handle it.
Some discerning viewers may have realized that I am not the biggest May stan. It's funny in a sad way because I was introduced to Night in the Woods as this game where you play as this 20-year-old college dropout who goes back to her hometown and does nothing but shoot the shit all day, which to me sounded like I was gonna go through the most relatable gaming experience ever. While I don't have the privilege of being a college dropout, I too, like many of my peers, had to go back home and live with my parents for 2 years after graduating because I couldn't get a real job. No, I'm not mad. Everything's fine. It's actually perfectly normal that a 4-year college degree gets you nowhere closer to a living wage, and a master's is not required for any type of meaningful career advancement. So anyway, I thought that I would high-key relate to May, that her story would speak to me, that she ended up in this shitty situation despite her best efforts not to. Ooh, lighting changed. But instead, I found myself kind of low-key hating May because she didn't seem to be trying. There was no recognition on her part that she needed to take accountability for any of her actions, especially her very violent actions in the past where she almost murdered a kid with a baseball bat.
This was really, really deeply disappointing to me because I really wanted to like May. I wanted to be her friend, to get to know her story and see things from her perspective. But even though we're literally forced to see things from her perspective, since we are physically in her body as we play through the game, we're not given any cathartic explanations as to why she acts the way she does towards the people around her, which is more often than not pretty shitty.
We are finally given an explanation for how May has been acting at the very end of the game, but it's kind of the exact opposite of anything that would make us excuse her behavior. There's no tragic backstory for May. She kind of is the tragic backstory for other people, like the kid that she almost murdered with a baseball bat. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? Because even if May was going through a ton of shit in the past, like even half the stuff that Angus went through with his abusive parents who beat him and almost starved him to death, it still wouldn't excuse her becoming a bad person because of it.
Angus is actually a really good example of this. He is one of the most genuinely kind-hearted and caring people. He seems to often help people for no benefit to himself, just because it's the kind thing to do. Even when he has nothing, he holds on to kindness, to Greg, and to the possibility of a better future with him.
Fucking hot. On the other hand, May never really goes out of her way to do things that would just be kind or helpful to do. Even though the game mechanics could easily set up some sort of side quest narrative, we never really get the chance to intervene in people's lives in a meaningful way to try to make them better.
We have to just stand by as this homeless man gets kicked out of the town for simply existing. Just watch this tragic story slowly unfold every day without being able to do anything about it. When May is given a chance to become a teeny tiny active participant in that story, when the man asks her to relay a parting thank you to the pastor, she doesn't even bother delivering his message properly. Jesus fucking Christ, May, he told you to thank her and you didn't even do that! She only seems capable of doing good things when there's something in it for her. For example, May helps Bee with the yearly Possum Springs history play, so that Bee would forgive her for the fight they had in her bedroom.
And this actually works. Not because May fully understands what she did wrong or because she apologizes properly or anything, but because Bee is an overly empathetic person, and May is there.
Bee doesn't have the time to run around town smashing up people's cars, listening to Salmer's poems, talking to random youth, going on boat rides with honestly somewhat creepy men, feeding precious little rat babies. She is stuck inside a store dawn to dusk every day and has no time to make any friends. Just imagine if Bee was the main character we were playing as. We'd spend 70% of the day working at the store, ordering supplies, dealing with customers. It'd basically be like a less fun version of Overcooked, where instead of cooking a cute instead of cooking a cute burger, you do invoicing or something. And then at night, if you haven't run completely out of HP, you'd get to maybe do one fun thing. As long as you also made sure your dad had food to eat and he wasn't about to off himself or something.
Not only would that probably not be a very fun game, imagining a real life person going through all that sounds exhausting as hell. So it's no wonder B doesn't have the energy to keep a grudge against May or to make better friends. It takes energy and time, which are both things that she just doesn't have. So when May shows up and is there every day, available and willing, B just kind of goes with it because it's better than nothing.
She tells May that she basically only hung out with Greg and Angus before, which isn't terrible, but I mean, being the third wheel to a practically married couple can get pretty depressing. She sees her friend Jackie once a month, and Jackie seems to really get B. She's like a version of who B could have been, who B wants to be, B being B, bin being B, bin beans. But Jackie is in a different town, a 2-hour drive away. You can't rely on someone a 2-hour drive away to be there for you every day, to help you pull off the yearly theater performance, to have dinner with and play music together. But May's there, and she seems to be there to stay. On my first playthrough, I got pretty mad at B. I got mad at her for forgiving May so quickly when May hadn't really done anything to deserve that forgiveness. I thought, she should really find some better friends, ones that don't treat her like this. But then I took a step back and realized I was doing exactly what I hated May for doing. Me berating B and telling her to stand up for herself and not forgive May so quickly and just find other friends was exactly like May telling her to stand up to her dad and quit the store and go do what it is that she wants in her life. It's unempathetic and unfair of me to judge her like that. I can try to understand, but I can't blame her for her choices.
So why am I blaming May? Am I not just blatantly showing favoritism to the most goth character in the room? I mean, yeah, of course. But also, there's a few things happening here. First of all, B isn't really hurting anyone around her other than herself. She's almost always acting in the best interest of those around her, to a fault. If May's actions only led to hurting herself, affecting nobody else around her whatsoever, that would be a very different story. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But May's actions, first and foremost, affect those around her.
Her parents put so much on her going to college. They pulled out a loan and everything, and she just dropped out without so much as an explanation. She constantly ruins B's nights off, and she fucking almost murders a kid with a baseball bat. Like, lol. Second of all, May has a lot of choices.
Okay, let me try to quickly clarify what I mean by choices by in a way that doesn't take me 10 hours going into like free will theory. So, she obviously does not have a choice in having the brain that she does and the mental illness that comes with it, and this is not what I'm basing my judgment of her on. But she does have somewhat of a choice in deciding how to respond to the aftermath of her actions. To a certain extent. This could be controversial, but I believe that mental illness is a spectrum. And under the right circumstances, privilege, I believe that some people have some ability to take some of their own mental health into their own hands. Like, I'm not saying, May, you should just try some meditation. Have you tried doing mindfulness? Let's go do some shrooms. You should try working out. Have you checked your iron levels? Because I had a cousin who had an iron deficiency, and so she was like super low energy all the time, but then she got her iron levels checked out, and now she's like totally fine. Have you tried not being like this? Get out of your head, you silly goose. You're too much. You think too much. Have you tried not having a mental illness? Why don't you try doing improv with me? Come on, let's do some improv. What I am saying more of is May was diagnosed with anger issues by the local doctor, dentist, psychologist in town. She is aware of the fact that she almost murdered someone in high school and that is a bad thing to have done. When she was in college, she was unable to leave her room and go to classes for 2 years, and she is also aware that that is probably a bad thing. And she knows that most people around her don't seem to be going through the same things as her. So maybe she could have Googled her symptoms. She could have gone to shitty campus peer counseling. She could have told her parents or her friends what was going on. Maybe asked for help. Something. Anything. Does May try? Anything? Not until the very end of the game do we see any semblance of self-reflection or effort on May's part. Even though it has serious emotional, financial, and sometimes life-threatening physical consequences to those around her, she decides to just ignore it. And to be clear, again, I'm not asking for her to be cured or for a formal diagnosis or anything as clear-cut as that. I just want to know that she tried.
At the end of everything, hold on to anything. Around the end of the game, Bea talks about Greg and Angus's relationship, and she implies that Angus is too good for Greg. She says that once they move to the big city and Angus sees he has more options, he'll move on to someone better. That Angus is only sticking with Greg because he's the only thing he can hold on to right now. Whether that is true or not, I think there's a deeper meaning we can infer from Bea's analysis here. I think Bea is putting herself in Angus's position and May in Greg's. I think that on some level, Bea recognizes that she's putting up with a lot more than she should, that she deserves more than what she's getting in return. I think she's implying that if she had the chance to move to a bigger city and have more opportunities, like Angus, she wouldn't settle for a friend like May. That if she were to make it happen somehow, she would find people more deserving of her love and effort. And to May's credit, I think she realizes this as well. After she fucks up again at a party and has to apologize to Bea again, she explicitly asks Bea whether they're actually friends or just best available friends. May knows the answer already, and we do too. The game has told us a long time ago.
Alright. Hello. It's just me. Okay, let's switch gears and talk a bit about the behind the scenes of this game. As many fans will know, Night in the Woods was actually crowdfunded via a wildly successful Kickstarter campaign. It was released in 2017 with massive fanfare and really impressive reviews, all of which are more than deserved.
Much of the initial positive reception it got was because of Alec Holowka, the game's co-creator who had built a reputation in the indie scene through his previous games like Aquaria and Towerfall Ascension. Night in the Woods only got made because Holowka reached out to Scott Benson, an independent American animator who had never worked on a game before, via Twitter because he liked Benson's art. So, the team consisted of Scott Benson, who did all of the art and half of the writing, his wife Bethany Hockenberry, who did the other half of the writing, and Alec Holowka, who did most of the coding and the music. As I said at the very beginning, all these elements, the writing, art, and music, just fit together beautifully and are what make the game the masterpiece that it is.
So, the game releases to a hungry audience and receives a level of attention that most indie creators can only dream of. That dream would turn into a nightmare, however, as the team gets caught up in a massive controversy in 2019, just 2 years after the game's release.
So, I'm going to pause here for a moment. One, because things are about to get pretty dark pretty fast, and two, because this section was supposed to be the emotional core of this video, as I got into some real-life events that happened and connected them to the narrative around Bea and May. But as I was editing this section, I started becoming more and more uncomfortable with the way it was all coming across. I realized the script wasn't as empathetic and considerate of the people who are alive today and who could potentially come across this video as I would want it to be. So instead of putting out a video that I might regret more and more as time goes on, or give up on the idea entirely, since rewriting and reshooting this entire thing would only bring me suffering. I am going to try something different. I'm going to present most of the information I was going to anyway, but without making any of the explicit connections I was before, since I don't feel like I really know how to do that right now with the grace and nuance that I want it to have. So if it seems like this section is a bit disjointed, you now know why. I don't know, maybe I can make a short video for patrons explaining my train of thought and more explicit conclusions if I end up opening a Patreon. Let me know if that would be interesting, I guess. But for now, this is what we got. Night in the Woods released in 2017. It was beautiful, and everyone loved it. It spoke to many people in a way that games never had before. 2 years after its release, stories about Alec Holowka's abuse in the games industry started coming out. It started with Zoe Quinn. Yes, the very same Zoe Quinn who was at the center of the Gamergate harassment campaign, who shared their story of first being abused and then being blacklisted in the industry by Holowka. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Many of Holowka's colleagues, friends, and even family members corroborated similar abuse stories, ranging from mental to emotional to physical and sexual. I'll link it all below if you're interested in hearing the details, as I'm not going to go too deep into that. August 27, 2019, Quinn posts their story on Twitter. I've been silent about this for almost my entire career, and I can't do it anymore. Sorry if this is rambling and messy. I'm scared shitless to out an industry legend like this, but I can't live with the secret anymore. On August 28, Benson and Hockenberry post publicly that they were cutting ties with Holowka. On August 31st, Holowka dies by suicide. His sister later says that Alec's suicide was not an attack against anyone. It was not done to prove a point. On September 3rd, a week after Holowka's death, Benson writes a lengthy, personal, vulnerable post about his experience with Holowka, both from the perspective of someone who thought of him as a close friend, but also someone who was a victim to his abuse. I began going to therapy weekly. I got on anxiety meds. The therapist was shocked at how much responsibility for Alec's moods and actions I'd taken. He hammered home over and over how I'm not responsible for what Alec did. I knew that. I did. But I still feel that I am responsible for all of what Alec did. I feel it somewhere, quietly, even now as I write this. It's absurd. That's one of the things abuse does to you. On October 1st, Holowka's sister, Eileen Mary Holowka, also wrote a lengthy, personal, vulnerable blog post. Let me start by making something very clear. I do not support the harassment of anyone, ever. I imagine this post will be used and butchered and repeated as a means to harass people and make politically motivated statements. I ask that anyone inclined to do so carefully consider whether this story is actually yours to take up. What do your words offer the people left mourning and surviving? She talks about her relationship with Holowka, growing up together, his neurodivergency, queerness, and mental health struggles. She talks about his journey to get better. I think of May in Night in the Woods and how much players support her, understand her, and empathize with her, while also acknowledging that she can be pretty shitty. I want the complexities we afford May to follow us into real life. I was surprised not to see any of that nuance and care coming from many of the game devs I once admired, not even the ones who have made games about mental health.
The problem with talking about people who are no longer alive is that they're no longer around to share their side of the story, so we're by default missing out on a lot here. Holowka's family spoke up about the situation and said that he had a lot of mental issues and a troubling past, but that he was actively working on it and working on becoming a better person to those around him. But Holowka was also accused of many horrible things, and he will never have to own up to it or face any consequences that aren't of his own choosing.
What's worse, when you search his name on YouTube, the most vile, disgusting clickbait videos pop up, calling his accusers liars and murderers, calling Scott Benson and Bethany Hockenberry liars and murderers, essentially blaming anyone but Holowka for his actions. doing the exact opposite of what his sister called for fans to do.
While I'm sure Holowka was a victim of many things, a victim of capitalism, of patriarchy, of a society with poor mental health services, of being part of an inherently exploitative industry that enabled his behavior, and much more that we can all relate to, he was not a victim for people speaking up about their experiences, and he wasn't a victim for those people wanting him to be held accountable for what he did, for making it impossible for many artists and designers and developers and programmers to join the games industry because of his abuse towards them. He's not a victim for being called out by these people and for them wanting him to face real consequences for what he did, because he wronged them in ways that are irreparable and have caused lifelong trauma. And, Jesus fucking Christ, you cannot blame his co-workers for his suicide. That is a vile thing to do to anyone, let alone to well-intentioned people who were doing the best under the circumstances and who are already experiencing a level of grief and guilt that I hope you never have to.
On October 28th, Benson and Hockenberry posted a backer update on Kickstarter where they talked about future plans for Night in the Woods and clarified some last remaining threads. We'll continue to deal with our end of it privately, as most everyone does. I do want to address one thing, though, a question we received several times in the past 2 months from fans of the game. Wasn't Alec just like May? Doesn't your response go against the spirit of Night in the Woods? Do you not care about people with mental health issues? It initially took me by surprise, since May was very much based on myself and Bethany and a couple other people we've known. But crucially, the issue with Alec wasn't that he had mental health and personality disorders. I've been pretty open about my own struggles, Bethany as well, and we're surrounded by a great and wonderful host of people dealing with brains and learned behaviors and habits that don't function as well as they should sometimes. The issue with Alec was power, and what he did with it. May doesn't have power in any real sense, nor does she seek to gain and exert any over others. None of her friends rely on her for their livelihoods or security. May can't hire or fire anyone or put herself in the position where someone would have to endure whatever she threw at them in order to not have their lives upended. May had problems, but May didn't do the things Alec did.
We all make mistakes. Sometimes it feels like we didn't really have a choice in making that mistake. It kind of just happens before we even realize what we did. But we almost always have a choice in how we respond to the aftermath. We can decide to ignore our mistakes and keep doing the same thing over and over again. Or we can learn, apologize, and take responsibility for what we did and those we hurt, and try our best to never repeat it. The best we can do is try.
May, as much as I've talked shit about her this entire video, tries her best to do that in the end. She apologizes to those she's wronged, starts being more honest about her struggles and experiences, and we're even left with the implication that she's finally going to try and get some sort of help for her mental health.
I guess I just wish people like May would learn these lessons without having to rely on human sacrifices along the way. And I wish people like B understood that they don't need to be that sacrifice over and over again. She is more than just shapes. We all are.